Lesson 4. Regular verbs. All Spanish verbs are either regular or irregular. In this lesson, we will look at 3 completely regular verbs.
Andar,
To walk,
beber,
to drink,
escribir.
to write. Notice the last 2 letters of each verb.
Andar,
To walk,
beber,
to drink,
escribir.
to write. There are 3 categories of verbs. AR verbs like hablar, ER verbs like comer, and IR verbs like vivir. All 3 categories are infinitives. You will recall from a previous lesson that infinitives are the base form of the verb, equivalent in English to speak, to eat, to live, etc. In Spanish, all infinitives end in AR, ER, or IR. AR verb,
Andar,
to walk. ER verb,
beber,
to drink. IR verb,
escribir.
to write. Remember what it means to conjugate a verb. To walk, I walk, you walk, he walks, she walks, we walk, you all walk, they walk. In this lesson, you will learn to conjugate our modal verbs for I, you, he, she, you formal, we, you all formal, and they.
Andar,
To walk,
yo ando,
I walk,
tú andas,
you walk,
él anda,
he walks,
ella anda,
she walks,
usted anda,
you formal walk,
nosotros, nosotras andamos,
we walk,
vosotros, vosotras andáis,
you all walk,
ellos, ellas andan,
they walk,
ustedes andan,
you all walk.
beber,
To drink,
yo bebo,
I drink,
tú bebes,
you drink,
él bebe,
he drinks,
ella bebe,
she drinks,
usted bebe,
you formal drink,
nosotros, nosotras bebemos,
we drink,
vosotros, vosotras bebéis,
you all drink,
ellos, ellas beben,
they drink,
ustedes beben,
you all formal drink.
escribir,
To write,
yo escribo,
I write,
tú escribes,
you write,
él escribe,
he writes,
ella escribe,
she writes,
usted escribe,
you formal write,
nosotros, nosotras escribimos,
we write,
vosotros, vosotras escribís,
you all write,
ellos, ellas escriben,
they write,
ustedes escriben.
you all formal write. Look for a pattern in the yo form. If the subject is I, yo, conjugate by dropping the ending and add o.
Yo ando,
Andar, take off the ar and add o to give ando.
yo bebo,
Beber, take off er and add o to give bebo.
yo escribo,
Escribir, take off the ir and add o to give escribo. Look for a pattern in the to form. If the subject is you familiar, conjugate by dropping the ending and add as or es. If the verb is an AR verb, add as, and if it is an ER or an IR verb, add es.
tú andas,
Andar, take off the AR and add as to give andas.
tú bebes,
Beber, take off ER and add on es to give bebes.
tú escribes,
Escribir, take off IR and add es to give escribes. Look for a pattern in the L form. If the subject is he, L, drop the ending and add either A or E. If the verb is an AR verb, add A, and if the verb is an ER or an IR verb, add E.
él anda,
Andar, take off AR and add A to give anda.
él bebe,
Beber, take off ER and add E to give bebe.
él escribe,
Escribir, take off IR and add E to give escribe. Look for a pattern in the ella form. If the subject is she, ella, conjugate in exactly the same manner as you did for he, L. That is, by dropping the ending and add a or e, depending on whether the verb is an AR, ER, or IR verb.
Ella anda.
Andar, take off AR and add a to give anda.
Ella bebe.
Beber, take off ER and add e to give bebe.
Ella escribe.
Escribir, take off the IR and add e to give escribe. Look for a pattern in the usted form. If the subject is you formal, usted, drop the ending and add either a or e. If the verb is an AR verb, add a. If it is an ER or an IR verb, add e.
Usted anda.
Andar, take off AR and add a to give anda.
Usted bebe.
Beber, take off ER and add e to give bebe.
Usted escribe.
Escribir, take off IR and add e to give escribe. Look for a pattern in the nosotros, nosotras form. If the subject is we, nosotros, nosotras, conjugate by dropping the ending and add amos, hemos, or imos. Notice that the ending of the infinitive determines which is used. AR verbs add amos, ER verbs add hemos, and IR verbs add imos.
Nosotros, nosotras andamos.
Andar, take off the AR and add amos to give andamos.
Nosotros, nosotras bebemos.
Beber, take off the ER and add hemos to give bebemos.
Nosotros, nosotras escribimos.
Escribir, take off the IR and add imos to give escribimos. Look for a pattern in the vosotros, vosotras form. If the subject is you all familiar, vosotros, vosotras, conjugate by dropping the ending and adding ais, ace, or is. Again, decide which ending to use by the class of infinitive, AR, ER, or IR.
Vosotros, vosotras andáis.
Andar, take off the AR and add ais to give andais.
Vosotros, vosotras bebéis.
Beber, take off the ER and add ace to give bebés.
Vosotros, vosotras escribís.
Escribir, take off the IR and add is to give escribís. Look for a pattern in the ellos form. If the subject is they masculine, ellos, drop the ending and add either an or en. If the verb is an AR verb, add an, and if it is an ER or IR verb, add en.
Ellos andan.
Andar, take off the AR and add an to give andar.
Ellos beben.
Beber, take off ER and add en to give beben.
Ellos escriben.
Escribir, take off IR and add en to give escriben. Then look for a pattern in the AS form. If the subject is they feminine, AS, conjugate in exactly the same manner as you did for they masculine, EOS. That is, by dropping the ending and add an or en, depending on whether the verb is an AR, ER, or IR verb.
Ellas andan.
Andar, take off the AR and add an to give andar.
Ellas beben.
Beber, take off ER and add en to give beber.
Ellas escriben.
Escribir, take off the IR and add en to give escriben. Then look for a pattern in the ustedes form. If the subject is you all, ustedes, conjugate by dropping the ending and add an or en. If the verb is an AR verb, add an, and if it is an ER or an IR verb, add en.
Ustedes andan.
Andar, take off AR and add an to give andar.
Ustedes beben.
Beber, take off ER and add en to give beben.
Ustedes escriben.
Escribir, take off IR and add en to give escriben. Present tense indicative in Spanish means three things.
Yo ando 1 kilómetro.
I walk 1 kilometer. I do walk 1 kilometer. I am walking 1 kilometer.
Tú bebes vino.
I drink wine. I do drink wine. And I am drinking wine.
Ella escribe una carta.
She writes a letter. She does write a letter. And she is writing a letter. In conclusion, to conjugate AR verbs, drop the ending and add
O, as, a, amos, ais, an.
To conjugate ER verbs, drop the ending and add
O, es, hemos, eis, en.
To conjugate IR verbs, drop the ending and add
O, es, e, imos, is, en.
In Spanish, the subject pronouns are not always required. This is because the verb endings can indicate who is performing the action.
Ando un kilómetro.
Yo is not necessary. I walk 1 kilometer.
Bebes vino.
Tu is not necessary. You drink wine.
Escribís una carta.
Vosotros is not necessary. You all write a letter. Subject pronouns are often used for clarification. For example, the verb form anda is ambiguous.
Él anda. Ella anda. Usted anda.
It is possible to use two verbs in a row. Just like in English, the first verb is conjugated while the second remains in the infinitive form.
Debo hacer un ejercicio.
I must do an exercise.
Deber hacer.
Common regular AR verbs.
Estudiar.
To study,
Repasar.
to review,
Hablar.
to speak or to talk,
Trabajar.
to work,
Andar.
to walk,
Cantar.
to sing,
Bailar.
to dance,
Entrar.
to enter, to go in,
Cambiar.
to change,
Practicar.
to practice,
Mirar.
to look,
Comprar.
to buy,
Lavar.
to wash,
Amar.
to love. Common regular ER verbs.
Beber.
To drink,
Comer.
to eat,
Vender.
to sell,
Deber.
must or to owe. Common regular IR verbs.
Escribir.
To write,
Vivir.
to live,
Abrir.
to open,
Decidir.
to decide,
Coincidir.
to coincide.